Just when you think it's over, it's not. What might seem like the end is not the case. Hope is never lost, and there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm 18 years old. I'm an only child, and I'm of Cuban, American, Israeli descent. When I was 10 years old, I was called down into the principal's office in elementary school via a loudspeaker. And mind you, I was a rather obedient kid, never got into any trouble, always followed the rules. So to me, the thoughts that were running through my head were like insane. I was worried, I was fearful, I was scared, I didn't know what would happen. And when I get into the office, I'm surprised to see my grandfather. Huge shock to me. I could have never imagined that this would have happened. And when I go inside, he asked me to sit down. He looks scared. He looks fearful. He looks anxious. And I sit down, and the words that came out of his mouth, I would have never, ever, ever imagined would be the words that he would ever have to tell me. He sat me down and said, "Your mother has been arrested, and you may never, ever see her again." And the feelings that ran through me depended on, well, I thought, okay, so what does this mean to me? I was 10, and of course I knew what jail was, but I never paid attention to what it really meant and how it would affect my life. So at the moment, I just took it as a shock, but the reality didn't hit me yet. He took me to his house after he had given me the news, and as soon as we walked in, he turned off all the TVs. I really didn't know why, and later on I found out that he only did that to protect me from seeing my mother on the news with what she had done and pictures of her everywhere. My mother was arrested for vehicular manslaughter and driving under the influence. The days, weeks, and months that followed after this news were hell, living hell for my family and I. Before she was arrested, I lived with her and my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. And now it would just be my grandmother and I. My dad was never really in the picture, but my mom played the role of being a mom and a dad so seamlessly that to me it didn't matter until that moment when I neither had a dad or a mom. And that's when it really hit me. My new relationship with my mom while she was incarcerated involved me seeing her in handcuffs in a courtroom and through a see-through window. Definitely different. So her trial lasted a year before she was sentenced, and this was the worst of it all. Her first lawyer gave us the expectations that she would be set free, it would be community service, no major charges, no time. So with this in mind, my family and I pretty much took it easy, and we were just worried about her well-being. And it took us a while to realize that this lawyer was actually extremely incompetent, and she had pretty much ruined the case to the point where we had to get a new lawyer. And at that point, with the second lawyer, what the first lawyer had done was pretty much set in stone. There wasn't much that he could do to help. But still, with the second lawyer, he was able to get her a 6 to 7 year sentence, which was a lot less than a lifetime sentence that the first lawyer had come up with. And I had this very vivid memory of being in the courtroom. I was there for all her trials, all her court proceedings. And I had this really vivid memory of having the court officers ask me to leave the courtroom and sit outside while they placed some explicit images for the jury to see. And when they sat me outside, I was by myself. All my family was inside, of course, making sure to see what would happen. And while I was outside, I was sitting on these benches and it was cold, I was by myself, and I was scared. What would happen to my mom? What was happening? Why couldn't I see it? And that was extremely traumatizing to realize that this is what it would feel like for the remainder of however long she would be there for. I'd be an outsider. So like I said, her trials lasted about a year. So that was pretty intense. I started to realize the reality of her being gone during my elementary graduation. I typically partook in chorus recitals, violin recitals, those types of things. And every time my mom would be in the crowd taking pictures of me and just looking proud at what I was doing. And for my graduation, while I was upstage, I looked down and I didn't see her. And that's when I really felt on the inside that she was gone. She wasn't going to be there anymore. And of course, my maternal grandparents were there and I was extremely appreciative, but it wasn't the same as having your mom there and having her look proud at you and saying, yeah, I did that. My transition from elementary school to middle school was extremely rough. It was not easy on me. I began to get bullied physically and mentally. And in conjunction with my mom not being by my side, I didn't take it so lightly. Usually when you get bullied in school, your parents can go and support you or defend you, just be there by your side. And I didn't have that. My mother was torn from me. And because of the mixture of her being gone and incarcerated and me dealing with things at school, I then started to self-harm. I had suicidal thoughts and I got depression. It was a nervous breakdown from everything that had just been boggling in my mind since I was 10. At this point, I was probably 12, 13, and the battle still wasn't over. I remember telling her how I felt in a visit, and of course, we weren't allowed to touch or hug or kiss. It was at the county jail through a glass mirror window thing, and I remember looking at her through the glass and having to tell her that I was having these thoughts, that I didn't want to be alive anymore. And I remember just looking at her and we were both crying through the glass. And all I wanted was my mother's touch. All I wanted was a hug, some reassurance to know that it's okay. You know, she's there for me. And of course, she was there for me from a distance, but all I needed was the touch. To cope with the things that I had dealing with bullying and my mom, and to regain my hope from everything that had happened, I joined a religious organization, Chabad. I joined sports such as cheerleading, track and field. And with all these things, they were able to preoccupy me and show me that things get better and make friends that'll support me. And throughout everything, I had no choice but to accept what was happening, what was my truth, my reality, what I was going through, my journey. But I was able to accept it all and cope with it. I currently live with my grandmother. My mother was remarried, and she was able to attend my high school graduation, at least. I started college at FIU. I'm studying criminal justice and pursuing a career in firefighting. I also have a boyfriend. Let's see. Okay. So, in the moment, I'm working on rekindling my relationship with my mother now that she is free. And we're working on getting the mother-daughter bond that we had and building it and making up for memories that we didn't have. Of course, we argue, we disagree, but in the end, we're there for each other and we're working every day for growth and love between us. Mom, I just want to tell you that I love you and I forgive you for what you did. We all make mistakes, and that's okay. I challenge you all to break free from your imaginary cell, whether it be emotional, religious, physical, mental, anything, and to never lose hope, because you can see from my story that because of hope, I was able to push forward. Thank you.